Up next, the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show with Snowden Bishop. After this message.
Most people don't realize that cannabis is serious business that requires serious technology solutions. Hi, I'm Terry from Sunstate Technology Group, where we are seriously proud to provide technology and security systems that help cannabis companies compete and succeed. From planning and expansion to hardware and daily IT support, I'm here to tell you that having the right technology is critical to security and smooth business operations. Partner with a technology team that understands the unique needs of this industry. For details, visit sunstatetech.com/cannabis. sunstatetech.com/cannabis.
And now, it's time for the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show with Snowden Bishop. Listen in as Snowden interviews cannabis industry pioneers, marijuana experts, policymakers, medical practitioners, patients, and other amazing individuals with compelling stories to share. It all happens right now. Here's the Cannabis Reporter, Snowden Bishop.
Hi, and welcome back to the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show. I'm Snowden Bishop, and I'm happy you could be here. Have you ever noticed how athletes who play contact sports appear to have superhuman resilience? The ease at which some of them seem to shake off serious blows and get back in the game is nothing short of amazing, especially considering that any one such occurrence would have me carried off the field in a stretcher and likely convalescing for weeks in writhing pain. But whether they're keeping their eyes on the prize or simply toughing it out for the good of the team, players pushing their physical limits like good warriors in the battlefield make it seem as though they're completely oblivious to the pain and risks of playing through their injuries. But off the field may be a different story. The NFL, MLB, MMA, and other contact sports leagues are notorious for dispensing conventional drugs to help athletes cope with injuries like strained ligaments, broken ribs, whiplash, and concussive blows to the head that can't be ignored once the adrenaline subsides and the residual pain kicks in. And when the NSAIDs don't work, they won't hesitate to prescribe opiates. While conventional drugs are effective for managing the immediate pain in the short term, they really do little to address the long-term problems repetitive injuries can cause. This is especially true of traumatic head injuries like concussions, which are all too common in contact sports and can cause permanent brain impairment over time. Medical researchers have begun to associate repetitive concussions with the degenerative brain condition known as chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, which often manifests as chronic headaches, insomnia, and dementia. While opiates and antipsychotics and benzos are prescribed to treat some of those symptoms, they pose dangerous side effects and have a high potential for addiction, which really only makes matters worse. This is where cannabis has proven to be a promising therapy for retired players afflicted with CTE and chronic pain stemming from a career of high-impact sports. While it's been nearly impossible for doctors to definitively diagnose CTE in a living brain, former athletes experiencing the symptoms of it can attest it is debilitating. Those who have access to cannabis can also attest that it's helping them cope with the symptoms and appears to slow the progression of the disease. And just as cannabis offers a safer alternative to commonly prescribed painkillers, there's mounting scientific evidence that it can actually help protect players who are prone to repetitive concussive injuries. And that explains why so many former athletes are now actively pushing for their sports franchises to end the overprescribing of dangerous pharmaceuticals and instead allow the use of cannabis to treat sports injuries and protect the brain. That's the topic of today's show, and I'm excited to introduce our guest. Anna Symonds is a pro athlete whose acclaimed career in rugby has already spanned 19 years. As a player in the U.S. Rugby Women's Premier League, she's won a USA Rugby Division I National Championship, selection to the National All-Star Competition, and won the Sydney Australia Premiership Championship. Also having competed as a touch rugby or sevens player, she's landed a coveted spot representing the USA at the 2015 World Cup and has won 4 national championships with the Portland Hunters. She's also competed in mixed martial arts when she's not on the field playing rugby. And today she's the director of education at East Fork Cultivars, where she runs a CBD certified education program. As an athlete ambassador for the nonprofit advocacy organization Athletes for Care, she advocates for cannabis research and patient rights with the hope that others who are struggling with pain might find their way to a safe and speedy recovery. She frequently speaks publicly about her experiences of healing and the benefits of using cannabis as both a preventative and curative medicine. Most recently, she was at the Cannabis Science Conference, where she appeared alongside a panel of athletes moderated by Dr. Sue Sisley. Anna, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad you're here. You're actually the first female athlete that I've interviewed about cannabis, so you have that unique distinction here.
I'm glad to be the first.
Well, I know that there are so many athletes, especially in the contact sports, that have really benefited from the use of cannabis. And I am eager to hear all about how you started advocating for cannabis, because this is something that, for a long time, athletes have been forced to stay at an arm's length when it comes to cannabis because of drug testing. And so I'm very eager to hear about the advocacy that you're doing. First, tell me, how did you actually get started? When did you start advocating for cannabis?
Well, I started working in cannabis a few years back, and that was really behind the scenes initially, doing some consulting and sort of behind the scenes work. And it was really only at the end of 2016 probably that I started to move into a more open role with cannabis, being a bit more public facing, and then really moved into a lot more advocacy and activism in 2017 when I became the director of education for East Fork Cultivars. And so I started to present regularly about cannabis science, CBD science. And then that year, I also became a member of Athletes for Care, a nonprofit mostly made up of retired professional athletes. And of course, we advocate for access, education, research, all of these important components. And so really, as I moved into last year, 2018, is when a lot of things really ramped up, and I was doing education, I was doing the athlete advocacy, and it's just continued to grow from there.
I was such a huge fan of rugby. When I was growing up in Aspen, we had the rugby teams come in the summertime from Australia and from different parts of the world. And so it was something that I was always so excited to watch. And lately, we don't hear a whole heck of a lot about the sport. And it's something that, I just remember so fondly, and I'd actually like to get back to it. What networks are carrying women's rugby? Do you know?
So there's a subscription service called Flow Sports. It's like FLO Sports that carries rugby online streaming here in the U.S., and you have to pay for it. So that's another hard thing, is that more people would love rugby if it was just on TV. They could easily watch it, but it isn't accessible that way. So it's like a catch-22 and something we're working on. But sometimes you'll see it on, sometimes there's free live streams. Like the Women's Premier League is offering free live streams for a lot of the games. So that's something they can look for from the Women's Premier League directly. There's links to those games. And then occasionally, I think NBC Sports will cover sevens, like certain sevens tournaments, and then obviously the Olympics.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be hard to find. And I think, satellite TV or direct TV has rugby from around the world, but I think the live streams as a free option, the quality is varying, but it's something that's there if people are interested.
Yeah. Okay. And as far as the athletes that who have either retired or are still active in the sport, is cannabis something that they're allowed to use now in places where it's legal, or is it still restricted like it is partly with the NFL and different sports franchises?
Yeah, it's still restricted. And there are definitely penalties, various types of different penalties that athletes can face for being open about using cannabis, about promoting cannabis, which is why you see mostly the retired professionals who are now willing to come out and say what they believe. And for me, really, too, it's because I'm a much older athlete than someone early in their career. And so for me, many of my windows of opportunity for certain things have passed. And so that it also makes it more comfortable for me to speak out, because there are some opportunities that are gone by anyway, and that I won't be penalized by losing for telling the truth publicly about this subject that's still seen as stigmatized.
What is it that you're able to do in terms of negotiating with the leaders of the franchise? And I mean, have you had any discussions with them? Are they looking into it? Is this something that they're just waiting for it to become federally legal to address? How is it going?
Yeah, I am hoping to have a conversation with some of the coaching staff for the women's national team for rugby, and just offer them some educational resources, because I think that they could benefit and the players could benefit. So right now, our league is in the process of professionalization, much like football in the 50s or women's soccer 20 years ago. So that has a lot of minuses to it. It's a lot of hard work that goes on. But of the few pluses, one is that we don't have money for drug testing players who are just on regular teams in the league. So we don't have to deal with that, at least. However, for players who want to play on the national team and are in that player pool, they can and will be tested by USADA and WADA. And from what I've heard from my friends who are in that cohort currently, is that the coaching staff has even discouraged players from using any CBD products, even though WADA doesn't prohibit CBD, because they don't feel comfortable and confident that the products won't be contaminated, as they put it, with THC, which is on the in-competition prohibited list for WADA, and can obviously, it can affect the player's eligibility, the team, and so they don't want to take any risks. I also think there's a lack of knowledge about the medicinal and therapeutic properties of cannabis and its various components. So, this issue of testing is one of the reasons that we, Athletes for Care, have petitioned WADA to remove THC from its prohibited in competition list. And you can find that petition online at change.org. But, we are pushing for awareness around this, because for so many sports, cannabis is a wonderful wellness tool. It just supports health and well-being in a number of ways. But particularly for the contact sports, where you're dealing with a lot of pain management, you're dealing with head injuries. Cannabis, we know, is neuroprotective. It has documented neuroprotective and antioxidant properties with neurons and nerve cells and brain health. So this is a unique resource that we really should be using in contact sports and any sports, and yet we're actually banning it, or we're making it hard to use the best formulations, the most therapeutic formulations of it. So really, I think education remains a huge piece of the global conversation around cannabis.
So I noticed that you're also a member of the Concussion Legacy Foundation and have pledged to be a designated brain donor. Tell me a little bit about that organization and how did you get involved?
Yeah. So this is an endeavor and an organization that I very much support. I am a pledged brain donor. So, I figure I won't be using it anymore. And, we can really have the ability to help advance the science around